In 1944, the U.S. Army put out a series of cartoons about three brothers. There was Private Snafu,
Situation Normal all f***ed up,
This is Snafu.
Private Fubar,
f***ed up beyond all recognition.
Oh, Private Fubar.
then there was TARFU, totally and royally f***ed up.
Well, here's Seaman Tarfu.
Snafu and Fubar quickly became part of the national lexicon, but poor old Tarfu was forgotten. For 87 years, he labored in obscurity until America finally became just f***ed up enough for him to be reintroduced. Today, America is beyond Snafu and Fubar.
Today, America is TARFU, and you're listening to the TARFU Report. All right, welcome to the TARFU Report, and we have kind of a wrestling theme to our inaugural week this week, because there was a lot of wrestling type stuff in the news this week, and with Donald Trump retweeting this crazy thing about him pile driving a superimposed image of CNN, and that launched this huge, ridiculous controversy. But before we get to that, and we have a lot of wrestling stuff coming up. We're going to be interviewing Jesse Ventura later on, but you told me off earlier this amazing statistic about wrestling, and I just wondered if you could repeat that.
Yeah, well, it's not actually a statistic, but it's some piece of research I read years ago at this point that has stuck with me. I don't know entirely how reliable it is, but I think it was a market research firm did the research, and they took sports fans and they measured fans of different sports by both their political beliefs and by how politically engaged they were, so how likely they were to vote or not vote. And as you might expect, like the most conservative and most likely to be politically engaged fans were college football, and most of the major sports were sort of up in that quadrant, especially college football, baseball was up there. The more liberal one was the NBA, but the sport with the single most liberal fan base that was also the least politically engaged was professional wrestling.
And there's something about that I love that for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, it really made just perfect intuitive sense to me as soon as I saw it, which is why I've thought about it ever since.
That's so great. I confess, I couldn't stand wrestling for most of the time growing up. Now, like, I get it. I think it's hilarious, and it really makes me proud to be an American. So what happened this week? You want to?
Donald Trump and CNN are having a fight.
Right.
The president is fighting with a TV channel, and he tweeted some what is referred to in the business as user-generated content, which
means somebody else did it.
Someone else made it,
right?
Yeah, and didn't get paid for it, and of repurposed professional wrestling footage, an animated GIF of
a real WWE event that Trump was actually
in, and in which CNN, or a wrestler with the head of CNN's logo, was brutally attacked.
Right.
Just completely destroyed.
Yeah.
As part of Donald Trump's general message of complete dominance over those who would dare cross him.
First of all, it's so great that he would do this. Like, what could he possibly have been thinking when he was doing this?
He saw it and he was like, "This makes me look good, and this is what I will do to CNN."
Right. No, it's fantastic. So he does this. The world instantly freaks out. Now, this is like the pattern with all Trump related news, that anything that he does that's inappropriate, which is basically everything that he does, immediately generates this firestorm of headlines and freak out breaking news. Things on cable news. The crawl is full of stuff on every cable news channel, and everybody's doing these stories. Like CNN had one that was called SmackDown on Twitter, so they immediately themselves got into the whole wrestling theme.
Yeah.
Which is part of like my whole thesis about this, is that Donald Trump, and I've written about this. I wrote about this in my book last year. That Trump has continually been trying to bait the press into basically acting like a heel wrestler. Like he gives them a villain name. He calls them the opposition party.
Yeah.
And he constantly gets them into these situations. And this was like visual proof that he thinks of it that way, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
Right. So of course the press fulfills every negative fantasy.
This is like the one thing. Trump is good at a couple of things, but the thing he's the best at is just knowing how to bait the press, and they fall into it every time.
Exactly.
They just fall into it every single time.
Right. If you don't spend a lot of time watching wrestling, you probably won't get that the one thing that the audience loves more than anything else is watching like the self-righteous good guy get whacked with a chair, right? So like if you're in the ring with a villain who does like a dirty move on you, and you get up and you start complaining like, oh, that was bad, like I was trying to fight fair, and the villain like sneaks up on the guy and whacks him with a chair and knocks him out. The crowd goes nuts. They love that every single time. They always want to see the good guy get wiped out. And the press, they play this role every single time, right?
Yeah.
And this is exactly what happened with this. And there was like this cavalcade of overwrought responses in the media. But let's start with what Trump said, right? What did Trump say in response?
The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
Now, one Republican accusing the president of trying to weaponize distrust.
The First Amendment is the beating heart of the American experiment, and you don't get to separate the freedoms that are in there.
The White House Homeland Security advisor watching the wrestling video on ABC's This Week came to the president's defense.
You're in charge of Homeland Security there.
Yep.
That seems like a threat.
Yeah, certainly not, though. I think that no one would perceive that as a threat. I hope they don't.
But
okay, a couple of things there. So that's Tom Bossert, the White House's Homeland Security advisor, who I guess doesn't have any emotions, right, or expressions.
Yeah, no, I mean, he has quite a look on his face. I think he might have gotten that job because he was good at just holding back whatever response he might have had to see whatever his boss does.
You ever seen those like robot expos where they have like these sort of phony like AI robots that can sort of slightly respond to like a human conversation? It's like slightly better than the old like interactive ELIZA programs. That's kind of what he reminded me of, that guy. So Trump basically says the press is pissed off at me and screw them because I'm the president and they're not. And then the media goes nuts, right?
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of clips here.
Your reaction first, Carl, to this anti-CNN video from the president this morning.
First, it's not just anti-CNN, it's anti-freedom of the press, it's anti-freedom of speech. It is a definitive statement by the President of the United States. And it also goes to the question that many military leaders in this questions are asked questions raised by military leaders in this country now, by the intelligence community, by people in Congress about the stability of the President of the United States. This is an index of his state of mind, visually. It's very disturbing. There's nothing lighthearted about it whatsoever. It is an incitement.
So that's Carl Bernstein. Yeah. So
not a wrestling fan, apparently.
Not a wrestling fan. And so, but that was one thing. And now we have the Baltimore Sun's media critic, David Zurowicz, who took it even a step further.
Take somebody, you slam them physically to the ground, you put a logo on identifying them. That's what fascists did in the 30s to people. This is not something, Ben, that you laugh about and say, oh, ho, ho, it's only 7 seconds. What a funny thing. Get a sense of humor. Yuck it up. It's
David,
not.
You're not saying we're anywhere near fascism, are you?
This is...
David, with all due respect, as a media critic, have you ever had this type of intensity towards people great example, Saturday Night Live, or would you say that that's humor and funny?
Listen, I denounced Barack Obama when he tried to cut Fox from the herd and say, I'm going to define what a legitimate news organization is. Ask Brian. I was on this show with the same intensity.
That's my favorite like media weenie thing too, where he's like, when Barack Obama did an entirely defensible thing, I was also mad about that, and give me credit for it. And the right is like, no, we won't give you credit for it.
Right.
we don't care.
Right. We weren't listening.
We weren't listening then. We don't care now.
We actually can't read. Right.
Yeah.
So you wrote that in a quote unquote newspaper, and so we didn't see that. But to me, this is just the press falling for this again, because they Trump does something crazy, and there's immediately this sort of font of outrage, calling it fascism and so on. What do you think? Is this really a physical threat? I mean, that Trump did with this?
No, it would be, the rules of professional wrestling are worthwhile here to remember, and like you said, it requires the audience being in on the joke, and I think you would have to be a person who doesn't understand that professional wrestling is staged. You'd have to be someone who doesn't understand that professional wrestling is staged to think of this as an incitement.
Right. And you would think, who says, oh, I thought that WWE match was real, said no one ever, right? I mean, that's what you would think, except...
Oh, right. Oh, by the way.
Except for this one problem.
There is this one person who might not know wrestling is fake, and it actually is Donald Trump. Because Deadspin found this video not long ago, and it's from a few years ago. The wrestler Triple H was being interviewed, and the WWE at the time had just done one of their storylines in which Vince McMahon, the president of the WWE, had been murdered. He went into his car, and his car exploded. And so here's Triple H saying how people reacted to that.
For Triple H, you're always good with the question.
Yeah, sure. How worried were you when you thought Vince McMahon was dead?
Oh man, I was scared to death. If I hadn't seen them pre-tape it where he got in and out of the car,
Of course, you're talking about the limo explosion. When we saw that,
what kills me is so many people call. I mean, the office next day, people. I'm not kidding you. And they'd probably be mad at me for saying Trump called and was like, "Did something happen to Vince?"
Did Trump not understand that was a skit?
It's the magic of television. You know what I mean?
So this is like the ultimate paradox. The only way that, first of all, it can't be really a threat against people, because in order to think it's really a threat against the press, you have to think that wrestling is real. But there's only one person on the whole planet
who thinks this is real,
and it's Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
So that's like. It's like an intellectual Mobius strip, right? What do you do with that?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's tough. So
now, if you're a guy whose head looks like CNN's logo, you should really be worried right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I have to say, my head looks like CNN's logo, and my son has been crying ever since he saw the tweet, Donald Trump's tweet.
He was traumatized.
He was traumatized. What are they doing to Daddy? He said.
Wow, he's never going to grow up right now. That's terrible. That's terrible.
But yeah, so then let's talk about, because this is the source of the video. Like I said, this is user-generated content. So where does Trump pick all this stuff up? It's
right.
He has people who sends it to him, but it always comes from basically the gutter, the absolute gutter of the internet,
right.
Which is often means Reddit or some Donald Trump subreddit. So this, the original version of this CNN GIF was created by a Reddit user named Han Asshole Solo.
And what's so crazy? First of all, it's crazy that somebody named Han Asshole Solo is suddenly like a figure who is in the middle of the political story of the week. But naturally, with these Trump controversies, they never end, right then and there. They investigate the history of Han Asshole Solo, and they find that he had some curious views. This is a quote from an old discussion in which Han Asshole Solo had a few things to say. He writes, "Explain to me why a weekend doesn't go by where 80 of you fucking moon crickets aren't shooting each other down in Chicago. Why you dumb fucking nignogs can't attend a rap concert without someone getting shot up."
So that's the guy who the president retweeted, sort of.
Right.
Exactly. So the other thing this guy did
was...
What's
a moon cricket? I never heard that.
I think they invent new racial slurs just so that you can't I
had to look it up. I couldn't find anything.
I think they just invent ones so that you can't get mad at them for using ones you've heard.
Right.
Because they're they think that's a magic trick.
Right.
If you don't know this phrase, then it's not one of the accepted racial slurs. But so the other thing he did is that he had made an image where he counted the Jews at CNN and had made a graphic that was all of these people at CNN with I think big stars of David on them, labeling all the Jews. So
well, there's nothing wrong with counting and labeling Jews.
No, I mean he could have. he could have gone to work in the Nixon administration. Like, there's a long and rich conservative history of
Unbelievable. So of course, this becomes a news story, right?
Yeah. Then the story becomes like, what is the source of this thing Trump tweeted?
Right, and it's basically like world awaits statement by Han asshole Solo at that point, right? And then I mean, this is perfect because he actually does put out a statement. And it's literally some of my best friends are Jewish.
Yeah.
Do you have it or wait? I have it.
I love people of all races, creeds, and origins. One of my best friends is a homosexual, and one of my best friends is Jewish, and one of my best friends is Muslim. His best friends are like a regular Benetton ad. Like he's
right.
Really,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he has very multicultural best friends. Naturally, though, of course, that's not the end of it because every story about Trump has to split exactly in half, and there has to be a counterbalancing controversy on the other side, right?
Yeah.
And so the controversy on the right is that CNN blackmailed Han asshole Solo, right? And the storyline here is that they wrote a piece about him. That he apologized. And that the network said it would not release his real name, but reserved, quote, the right to publish his identity should any of that change. which I don't know.
It was very interestingly worded.
Yeah. I'm not sure I would have done that. But
so this is the thing. This becomes a story then. CNN is threatening to blackmail Han asshole Solo by doxing him. And one thing is that if in the course of normal reporting they had reported his identity, it would have been a perfectly normal news story. It would have been like, here's this guy who did this thing. So out of politeness to him not using his real name, they were being, I think, pretty generous to him.
Yeah.
But so then what they put in this weird language here, and when you read this, I'm sure that this immediately jumped out to you as legalese. Right? Like, did you look at that? I did, and I was like, a lawyer inserted that.
Right.
So it's not the reporter, Andrew Kaczynski. And of course, everyone is now saying Andrew Kaczynski's blackmailing this guy.
Right.
So then I think Keenan Trotter, one of my colleagues, just reported, that it was put in by basically like the VP of standards there. But here's just how inserting this weird legalese to cover their own ass in some future sense ended up causing this controversy to get worse.
Oh, but this is so classically what happens with reporting of any kind. You add something in to make the lawyers happy, and then there's like a butterfly effect, right? Like it turns into like you're trying not to slander the person, and you end up blackmailing the person. You know what I mean? It's like it's a classic thing that and of course, the quote unquote fever swamps of the right immediately made as much hay of it as they possibly could. They freaked out even more than, the Carl Bernsteins and David Zarowicks of the world freaked out about the physical threat now, right?
Yeah. I mean, and part of it's you can never tell with these guys too, like what percentage of it is genuine and what percentage of it is just trying to sort of get a reaction. And so you have, they rile themselves up with outrage, but the thing they also do is that they sort of exaggerate it just to like piss off the liberals too. I mean, obviously.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you had that with Mike Cernovich, right?
Yeah.
And he tweets out this thing. Scoop! Sources tell me there's a protest plan to be held in front of @K-File's home. That's the reporter, Andrew Kaczynski, because he doesn't believe in privacy. #CNN blackmail.
Yeah. And so the point of that is to make Kaczynski freak out. Like the point of that, like I don't even know if anyone showed up to his home.
Right.
And one of the things about the sort of people who like the real Reddit Nazis who follow people like Cernovich, like they're scared of cities and they're scared of black people.
Right.
So like the idea
germs.
of them, so the idea of them going to Brooklyn to like protest outside of Andrew Kaczynski's home is actually sort of silly.
Yeah.
Like they're this is like the guy who shot Comet Pizza. he brought a gun and started shooting because he was scared. Like there were these internet white supremacists who went to the Black Lives Matter protest in Minneapolis and shot people there. And they showed up from the suburbs and they were scared because they were in the city and surrounded by black people.
Right.
So like on the one hand, well, there's not going to be a mass protest in Brooklyn because they're scared of cities. And on the other, the two people who show up might fucking shoot you.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of, I don't know if I'm weighing the pros and cons of that. It's there's definitely positives and negatives there, but mostly negatives, I would say. But it gets worse, right?
Yeah.
We have hashtag CNN blackmail, and then Donald Trump Jr. chimes in with this tweet. Do you have that?
So I guess they weren't effective threatening the admin, so they go after and bully a 15-year-old. Seems in line with their, scare quotes, standards, hashtag CNN blackmail.
Which, like, we're so far away from the truth at this point.
Yes.
We're like on the other side of like one of the moons of Jupiter at this point, in terms of like being far away from any kind of reality. But the whole point, as you said, was to draw out CNN, draw out Kaczynski, and they did exactly that. Like CNN has to issue this absurd statement, which just reading it was, again, I was imagining the 5 lawyers putting this together. Any assertion that the network blackmailed or coerced him is false, said a statement from the network. The user, who is an adult male and not a 15-year-old boy, apologized and deleted his account before ever speaking with our reporter. I mean, couldn't you just hear, like, it couldn't even been more ridiculous than that, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And so like CNN, like, their standards people and their lawyers and their PR people are all in a room. Like, okay, the president's son says that we blackmailed a 15-year-old. None of that is true.
Right.
Like, how do we make a statement? Like, how do we answer this in a statement?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we didn't blackmail Han Asshole Solo, who isn't a 15-year-old with horns and magical extrasensory powers, or this whole thing got completely ridiculous. And then Kaczynski also made a statement, right? What did he say? He says,
he said that Han Asshole Solo posted his apology, which was the thing about how he has friends who are of various ethnicities. Some of them, yeah. But in that statement, he did actually apologize for what he'd done. He did. He was like, I feel really bad about it. I'm sorry. But he said he posted an apology before I ever, because so in the world of the Trump internet guys, it became this thing where CNN blackmailed a little boy into apologizing for making anti-Semitic memes.
Right.
How dare they? When in fact, like, an adult man was actually forced to confront his own behavior and then regretted it.
Right. Sincerely regretted it after the president of the United States retweeted it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And it's like, this is how they're completely ill-equipped to respond to and deal with the way this game is played now.
Right.
Like the corporate communications of Turner Broadcasting, like, has no clue how to respond to like an army of people who don't care about the truth. Yeah, exactly. Provocateurs who don't care about the truth.
Right.
And are just in it to score points.
Yeah. I think this actually was a weird factor in the race last year.
Yeah.
Trump continually did this, right? He would do something completely nuts, and then the entire press corps would bug out, and you would have a whole news cycle full of people denouncing him. And again, people don't watch when people watch TV, they don't even listen to what people are saying. All they're doing is they're paying attention to emotional cues. Is this person angry? Is this person self-righteous? Is this person smiling? Is this person like me, and what they got was this, Trump would say something nuts and kind of like offhand.
Yeah.
And then there'd be this army of New York, Washington, LA reporters who'd be harumphing and like furious.
Yeah.
And people would just kind of do compare and contrast.
I can't believe you said the moon is Muslim. You
right,
know, like,
yeah,
I can't,
exactly.
like, we're going to bomb the moon because it's Muslim. You can't say that.
Right, yeah,
and,
exactly.
It's like everyone, but he just said it, like, he said it like confidently and like didn't, and you know, so.
Right. So everybody else looks like they've lost control, and Trump looks like he's just completely, you know, hey, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, this was just a classic.
Someone else has pointed out something that he does too, which is that he says things in the tone of joking that are never jokes.
Right.
Like there are no punchlines. So he doesn't actually understand humor, but he has the cadence of jokes.
Right.
So then so you can sort of just be like, oh, you know, it's joking, but there is never irony or humor in it.
Yeah, I can't remember him actually being funny, like in the classic sense of funny.
Like the only time he's funny is when he's insulting people, which is not even a joke. That's just being mean to people.
Right. Yeah, I guess with the Rubio thing with the water. That was sort of kind of.
But it's like he has the cadence. He has the cadence of a comedian.
Right.
So people mistake it for being intentionally funny.
Right. But it's never actually funny.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, this story was a classic example of how everything works in with Trump news now. Like, a bad thing happens, people flip out, and then it immediately, like in almost factory-like fashion, turns into two dueling conspiracy theories, one more crazy than the other, usually, of course. And no one really pays attention to what... I mean, I have no idea what really happened in this story. You know, it doesn't really matter at this point. It's just a bunch of impressions. But that's exactly what wrestling is.
No, right? That's it. I mean, it's like it is. It's just a bunch of. It's a completely disconnected from reality series of conflicts playing out on TV. Like that's that's what it became, and that's what that's the ground. Certainly, that Trump feels a lot more comfortable sort of running his presidency on.
Right, exactly. and if you're trying to like divine some hidden meaning in this, you're consuming this product incorrectly.
Yes.
Because this is basically the same as WWE. You're just supposed to watch it and kind of probably root for one side or the other, and you know, and that's it. And it's crazy. But that was the big story of the week.
I'm Alex Perrine.
And I'm Matt Taibbi.
This is the TARFU Report, our brand new podcast. You are about to listen to an interview we did with Governor Jesse Ventura, former governor of my home state of Minnesota, on a wide array of topics that he pretty much led the conversation because we were scared to interrupt him.
That's right. We were frequently physically intimidated.
We were physically intimidated by him over the phone. Right. We had a little bit of a wrestling theme in what we were talking about today, so that carries through with our conversation with Jesse. And he also had a lot to say about a court case, which is a suit he filed against the American sniper Chris Kyle, who defamed him by telling this crazy story about him beating up Jesse Ventura in a bar that was untrue. And then the case was overturned, which Governor Ventura is not happy about.
And he also told a couple of really great stories, among them a crazy and little-known story about his departure from MSNBC many years ago during the Iraq War, and his relationship to the media and his views on the Trump presidency and campaign, and from the vantage point of somebody who was one of the original sort of non-politicians, and it was an interesting conversation. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Governor Jesse Ventura. Hello, this is Governor Ventura.
Yes, it is.
It's Matt Taibbi from Rolling Stone.
Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
How are you doing?
Good. I haven't talked to you for quite a while now.
I know. It's been a while. It's been
yeah, for sure.
This is a new podcast. It's called the TARFU Report.
Okay.
TARFU is the old, you know what snafu and foobar are, right?
Yeah, foobar, absolutely. That's fucked up beyond all repair.
Exactly. So,
and I've heard of snafu. They're all military terms, I think.
Exactly. The Army made a movie back in the 40s. It was about three privates who were kind of these goofballs, and they were snafu, foobar, and TARFU. And TARFU stands for totally and royally fucked up. So that's us. We're TARFU. So it's
yeah. Well, if you've done time in the military, you can understand those terminology. technology pretty good.
You were in the military, right?
Yep, I did 6 years United States Navy.
Wow, excellent. Where were you?
I was virtually did all my Navy time in San Diego, other than when I deployed overseas. I did a 9-month deployment and an 8-month deployment. I did 17 months in Southeast Asia.
Wow, excellent.
During Vietnam.
Oh, wow. Did you see any action there during that time?
I got there. I got multiple places. I even got to what's the hot spot right now.
But in the Middle
We got
East?
sent up
so
to
North Korea?
We got sent up to the DMZ in Korea.
Oh, wow.
Yikes. How long were you there?
Fortunately, only a week.
Wow.
They sent us up to work with the South Koreans. They were getting infiltration down from the north.
Wow, crazy.
And so we got sent up there. It was horrid because we had left Vietnam and the Philippines where it was like 98 degrees, and what do you call it? Korea is on the DMZ is the same parallel as Minnesota.
Yikes. Well,
so the temperature up there was 36 with snow flurries. So I went from 98 oppressive, humid and heat in the jungle up to 36 in snow flurries in a day.
Wow. Wow, excellent. Well, you're a native, you're right, native Minnesotan, right? So that would.
Oh yeah, but that's why I hate cold weather.
So
I'm born in Minnesota. There's a reason you hate it.
We're on with Alex Perrine, who's also from Minnesota.
Hi, Governor.
Hi, Alex. How are you? Where are you from in Minnesota?
From Minneapolis.
Oh, are you? Did you go to school in Minneapolis?
Yeah, I went to South actually.
Did you really? I went to Roosevelt.
Yeah, I knew plenty of people there.
Well, we know you have limited time, so we want to get through this. We want to ask you about a bunch of things. Let's. I know you got a new book out. I want to ask you about this. Your marijuana manifesto. So, first of all, what prompted you to write this? Because I read it.
Well, what prompted me to write the marijuana manifesto was because marijuana, or cannabis as we refer to it now, I think people within that industry and within the culture like to refer to it now as cannabis. Cannabis gave me back my quality of life. I had lost it.
From what?
Well, it wasn't me directly, but someone very close to me developed a seizure disorder, epileptic seizure disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And this person was seizing upwards, sometimes 2 to 3 times in a week.
Wow.
And if you've ever dealt with seizures, you're helpless. Even if you're not getting the seizure, you are helpless because there's nothing you can do. You just have to wait the seizure out, make sure the person still keeps breathing, and be there when it's over. And we were facing a future that was gone. This person was put on 4 different pharmaceutical drugs. All of them did not work. All of them had huge side effects. In desperation, we went to Colorado because Minnesota hadn't legalized, quote, medical marijuana yet.
Wow.
We went to Colorado, got it illegally through friends out there. When we arrived there and the person started taking the drops under the tongue, this person has never had a seizure since.
Wow.
And is completely weaned off all pharmaceutical, and today gets it in pill form in Minnesota and has not had a seizure. And so, to me, cannabis not only stopped the seizures, it keeps them at bay.
That's interesting because I thought it was because of your experience living in Mexico, because you start the book with this amazing story about the Mexican attitude toward it and the constitutional challenge to the illegality, this whole idea that you can't pass a law that inhibits the free development of a Mexican citizen's personality. Like, could you talk about that? I thought that was amazing.
Well, what it is, that's a case that happened in Mexico, where 4 people took it to the Mexican Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in just those 4 people's favor.
Oh, so
no one else.
Only those 4 people are allowed to smoke?
They're allowed, but here's how it works in Mexico. If more continue to come forward and challenge under the same thing with the same judges, after they rule on it 2 or 3 times, it then becomes the law.
Wow.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
So Mexico could theoretically, they just legalize full medical now in Mexico. Canada's already done it. Next year, Canada's voting on full legalization. And truthfully, guys, this nonsense of calling this plant medical or recreational is ridiculous.
Right.
There should be no distinction, because those that smoke it for the euphoric feeling are doing it for mental health.
Right. Right.
And I would rather have somebody smoking cannabis than taking Prozac.
No, absolutely. I think I'd rather have people smoking weed than doing almost any other drug, frankly. Right?
Well, it's ridiculous. And the other thing we've proven, too, now, this is a $45 billion industry waiting to happen. When they want to talk about jobs, here's jobs waiting. 18,000 new jobs in Colorado. $2.4 billion to the Colorado economy. Saw the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
And that's just Colorado.
Right.
It's absurd. I mean, when you look at it then, too, Matt and Alex, if you're religious, didn't God make this plant?
Absolutely.
And religion teaches you that God put everything here for us to use.
Right.
Well, I don't think God put cannabis here for us to eradicate it.
Yeah, and the government's attitude toward this, as you point out in your book, has been crazy, and contradictory, right? They, on the one hand, they claim it has no medicinal benefits, and on the other hand, right?
Oh, here's the deal. They've done all the study. This university in Israel, it's called the Cannabis University. They know it can help post-traumatic stress for soldiers. It can help the head issues in the NFL, the concussion issues. The list goes on and on and on. As I said in my statement when I spoke at the Cannabis Convention, I said it's unique because if George Washington and Tom Jefferson were alive today, they'd be doing 10 to 12 years in the federal prison as drug dealers. Now, if you're like me, what's wrong with that picture?
Right.
Excuse me. The father of our country and Tom Jefferson, and you look at it, here's the final argument. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and Betsy Ross's original flag are all made out of marijuana.
Is that true?
Yes.
Wow.
Did this is what I learned, Matt, when I wrote this book. It was the economic backbone of our country for the first 150 years.
Wow.
The British made the colonies grow it so they could get it to make sails and rope so they could go colonize the world with their navy. They didn't have room to grow it. We did. So you could actually trade it in lieu of money.
So Washington and Jefferson, and then of course Obama and Bush also admitted to having smoking. Maybe is there
Washington and Jefferson didn't admit to smoking; they raised it.
Right. Oh, I see.
That's why they would be going as drug
They'd be serving
dealers.
hard time. Yeah.
Right.
They'd be doing hard time.
Yeah.
Right.
They wouldn't be just users; they would be dealers because they grew it.
Right. So they'd be going away for a while.
Our first and third president.
So while
you
we're
gotta laugh, don't you?
No, it's hilarious. I mean, it's such a strange thing that there are people. I mean, I did a story once about how in New York City it's actually legal to carry around marijuana under a certain amount, but there's still like 50,000 arrests a year in the city.
Well, it's absurd. Let's bring it above board. It'll create a ton of jobs. It's an industry. It's $45 billion waiting to happen.
And we could use that.
That's what they said at the convention.
Yeah.
45 billion.
Wow.
With a B. That's Wall Street numbers, Matt.
And there's plenty of tax revenue too. You might as well tax it, right? So.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Shoot. Hey, I have two friends. We'll move to another subject. Let me finish with this. I have two friends out in Colorado now that are retired.
Mm-hmm.
Under new law with licensing, they're making $100,000 a year just growing pot in retirement.
Wow.
Now, how nice would that be? You collect your Social Security, you collect your retirement, you live on a nice little plot of land out in Colorado and you make $100,000 a year raising pot.
Maybe they should just give out your Social Security in pot seeds.
You know,
yeah.
But I mean, how nice is that?
Yeah, it's
I mean,
great.
it sounds like a retirement plan I would endorse. I think I would vote for anyone.
$2,000 a week.
So while we're on the subject of Mexico, can I ask you, because last time we met, we had a meal in New York, and you told me this amazing story about Casa MSNBC. Is there any way could we possibly talk about that? I always thought that was a fan.
Well, what had happened? Casa MSNBC came about because when I got out of office, I was the hottest commodity out there in 2003 because I was the voice of the independent.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a Democrat, wasn't a Republican. So Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN got in a bidding war to get me. MSNBC won. At that time, they were not liberal like they are now. They were kind of Fox light.
Yeah, right. They had actually just fired a bunch of liberals.
And so what happened was this. They were building a show for me, which I convinced them, let's do it from the Midwest. Everything's either East Coast or West Coast. We're not hearing nothing from the heartland of America. So they agreed. Show would originate out of Minneapolis. So we're setting it up. I created about 25 jobs here with the show, the whole thing. It's the Iraq war is on the horizon. I, of course, verbally came out unapologetically and said, I am not in favor of this. This is ridiculous. Why are we invading Iraq? They had nothing to do with 9/11.
Right.
There were no hijackers who were Iraqis. We went to war because of 9/11, and Iraq had nothing to do with it, but now we're going to invade this sovereign nation. So what happened was, my show's getting ready to be on 5 nights a week. We got a phone call, and the phone call was, is it true Governor Ventura doesn't support the invasion of Iraq?
So do you think
that
the
answer was yes, that's true. There was a pause. Does headquarters know about this? We don't know.
Wow.
Another pause, and then it was, do you think he'd change his mind?
Oh, my God.
Seriously?
And my subordinate who was talking, I wasn't on this conversation, but it was one of my key people. He said, no, when the governor gets his mind set, you better have a lot of evidence to change it, and I don't think there is enough. He's a Vietnam veteran, and he always says, like the Who, we won't get fooled again. You know? And so what happened then, in a nutshell, my show was pulled. At the time, MSNBC had brought back Phil Donahue. He was their highest-rated show. He was also against the invasion of Iraq. He got pulled also. Ashley Banfield got pulled temporarily. The three of us who spoke out against the invasion of Iraq were all taken off the air. I was never given a show. They paid me for the whole 3 years, and but I couldn't do anything because my contract, I was under contract, I honor contracts. I couldn't do any other cable network shows or any news programs.
Oh, my God.
So
in essence, they had my silence for 3 years through the whole Iraq war, and yet they just paid me multi-millions of dollars to have that silence.
So you did the only natural thing, which is to go down to Mexico and build yourself a really cool spread and live there, right?
Yeah. I went to Mexico. I bought this home off the grid, and down there you name your homes. It's Casa whatever. And I came within an eyelash of naming it Casa MSNBC because they bought it. But I ended up naming it Casa Hombre Rana, which in Spanish means home of the frogman.
Wow. Okay.
Because hombre's man. Everything in Spanish, they flip around. They say what it is, and then they describe it afterwards.
Right.
Where we do the opposite. We put in like the black car, they'll go car black.
Right.
And so hombre rana is man frog. So it's the house of the man frog.
House of the man frog. That's great. That's
Yep.
Do you think that they designed the show with the idea that you could be a cheerleader for the war?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
Let me back up a moment and tell you another out of the scenes thing that happened.
Sure.
When Eric Sorensen hired me at MSNBC, he threw me a bone and he took me to the Super Bowl that January. When we got done, we were driving in a limo from San Diego, where it was at, up to L.A. And on the way up there, Sorensen says to me, really weird, in the back of the car, he says, you know, after I hired you, he said, I got 2 calls, 2 very high-ups in Washington, and he wouldn't say who they were. And he said they wanted to know why I was giving you a national platform.
Wow. Huh. So that just proves...
And I never found out, because Sorensen ended up getting fired, and they ended up paying me off, and I was out of the picture for 3 years just collecting money. And living in Mexico for half the year. But I've always wanted to try to find him and see if today he would tell me who these 2 higher-ups were.
Oh, we got to find that out. That's a Scooby-Doo mystery we got to get to the bottom of, I think.
Well, it was interesting. They wanted to know why I was getting a national platform. So I scared people.
I mean, it flies in the face of what everybody believes. I mean, what I usually believe about the media is that they're almost entirely, financially driven. Usually, right? I mean,
yeah, that's the funny thing about it, is that they sometimes make decisions that do not make financial sense, but make ideological sense. Because like MSNBC right now is hiring all these conservatives while their liberals are getting the most ratings. And it really doesn't make sense if the market or ratings is the only thing you're doing.
And it's an exact parallel to what Governor Ventura was talking about. Because
well, to me, mainstream media in America is completely bought and sold by corporation now.
Right.
And the corporations likewise own the elected people too. And that's why you're getting this barrage. Guys, I don't buy into the Russian thing at all.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it either.
No, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I do not. I think it's trumped up just like Iraq was. I think it's trumped up just like the Gulf of Tonkin incident that they've now proven didn't happen.
But it's getting great ratings.
That put us in the Vietnam War.
Right.
And the people that sit back and think government won't lie to accomplish something, they're naive.
Right.
Government will lie. And I don't buy into this Russian stuff right now. Guys, did you know I was at that, I guess, famous meeting?
Which one?
I don't even, the one with Flynn and with Jill Stein.
Oh, really? Oh, the RT thing?
Yeah, the RT thing where the RT paid Flynn, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't even know it till Tyrell told me.
Oh.
He says, Dad, you were there. I said, you mean the thing we did with RT, the 10-year anniversary? That's what they're talking about on TV? He goes, yeah. I said, are you joking?
Did you overhear the conspiracy?
It was a black tie affair. I've been to dozens of them honoring RT. It just happened that Gorbachev was there and Putin was the keynote speaker.
Wow. Did you meet Putin?
Yeah.
Did he say anything?
Are you taller than Putin?
Come up to me.
Are you taller than Putin?
He's significantly taller than Putin. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Putin's not a tall man.
Okay.
No. He's got a good build on him. He looks kind of like a wrestler gymnast.
He's into judo.
He's got a good build on him. He's put together. He's a year younger than me. No, he came right over to me that night at the end and shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and he said, "Thank you, Governor." In English.
Wow.
And you want to hear something interesting?
Mm-hmm.
He called me governor when I met Fidel Castro in 2002, when I went to Cuba over the objections of the U.S. government and the Bush administration, of course. Castro called me governor. Yet in my court case, the 2 judges, Riley and Shepard, that overturned my case and broke their own rules to do it, in their 23-page thing, they never once referred to me as governor.
I thought that was sort of a standard, sort of etiquette thing, that once a person has been an executive.
And these people, I pay their salaries. They're part of our federal government, and they won't call me my title.
Right.
And yet, 2 people who are allegedly our enemy, Putin and Castro, both call me governor. I get more respect from them than I do the people in my own government.
Well, you still get a lot of respect. I mean, look, in a way, you were kind of a harbinger of a lot of different things. I mean, your election was one of the first signals that the electorate had a completely different idea about things as opposed to the two major parties. Do you mean?
Well, Trump copied us like the playbook.
In what way?
Well, he did one thing different. He joined the Republicans. That's why I wouldn't support him, because he didn't. If he'd have stayed independent, it would have been different. But he joined the Republican Party. But he did these type of things. While Hillary Clinton was running around going to fundraisers, making money, Donald Trump was holding rallies. That's what I did.
Right.
I didn't raise money. I went out and made appearances and had rallies where you drew 5,000 people, you drew 3,000 people, you did this and that. That's how you win it. That's what Trump did. He did exactly what I did. Instead of running around to big donors and kissing their butt, he went out to the people,
right,
and showed up.
And I've heard that criticism from people in Washington that, you know, the two major parties have fallen into this habit of their formula for winning is raise a lot of money, make legacy media appearances, and make ad buys, right?
Yeah,
and
they don't appear. Yeah, what was Trump doing? He came here to Minnesota and he went out to a big airline hangar, and they had thousands of people in the hangar, and he dresses the crowd. I did the same thing. They told me when I ran, "Oh, forget the colleges. College kids don't vote." I said, baloney, I'm going to the people that don't vote. I went to every college in Minnesota and spoke.
Right.
And the headline in the paper after I won, throngs of young people turn out. And Trump came to see me right after I won.
Did he really?
Absolutely. There's pictures of Donald and I. We were trying to get him to run with the Reform Party back then.
I remember when he was flirting with the Reform Party a while ago, yeah.
Yeah. No, Donald came out here and we did a big photo op together and da-da-da-da-da-da-da and all that. I just feel bad that Donald became a Republican.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think we all have some feelings about that. Why do you think the electorate kind of went away from the parties, though? I mean...
Because they're tired of it. They're getting smarter.
Right. Right.
They're sick and tired. It's like my friend Ralph Nader, the two-party dictatorship.
And they can see through it.
But the sad thing is Trump's aligned himself with the party. So you've still got it.
What do you think of his style in office? We were just talking before we spoke to you. I mean, he seems to borrow a lot of techniques from like the WWE style of PR. Do you see that at all?
Well, if he does, it works, don't it? No, I mean, you know, Donald was involved in a couple of WrestleManias, but not very much. Usually he just provided the buildings.
Right.
But then they worked him in a little bit later after I had left. I wasn't there when that tape came out or when Donald did that for Vince. But don't forget, Vince's wife is working for him now.
Yeah, right.
You know, and but, you know, the thing is this. I don't know how to describe. I wouldn't govern like Trump. For the main reason is I don't Twitter.
Right, right.
You know, I people would probably be mad at me because they'd find out, Matt, I've never owned a cell phone and I don't know how to use a computer.
Wow, really?
No. And now I've made it my life's mission not to own the cell phone.
That's kind of cool. That's sort of a challenge to try to make it all the way through without, you know.
Well, I was out in New York the other day on the book tour stuff, and I was at Sirius Radio in the green room. And there were like 10 of us waiting in there to go to the different radio stations. 9 of the 10 people were all staring at their phones.
Right. Right.
I looked around and said right out loud, I'm the only person in here that doesn't sit and look at a phone all day. And they all looked at me and sheepishly. I think they actually had conscious trips for a second.
One last thing we wanted to ask you about. There's this
Sure.
I don't know if you've heard about this. There was a guy in Kentucky. He's an amateur wrestler. His name is Daniel Richards, and he has this great act. He calls himself the Progressive Liberal. He's basically a heel wrestler who goes around and he yells at conservative audiences saying like, you continually vote against your own interests. And he like wears Clinton shirts and stuff like that. It's a really funny like sort of political satire wrestling act.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
In my early days of wrestling, Matt, everything was stereotyped.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody every German was a Nazi. every Japanese guy was sneaky and threw salt. Polish wrestlers were dumb. Big, strong, and dumb, and you go right down the line.
Right.
And that's one of the unique things there was about wrestling, is that you took all these stereotypes and you threw them in front of the people, and the people would go there, yell and scream their hearts out, and by the time they were done at the end of the night, they couldn't commit an act of violence if they wanted to.
Right.
They're so physically drained.
Yeah.
And mentally.
And,
from yelling and screaming. So in a way, I thought wrestling in the old days worked a great deal in the psyche of people in many ways by exposing those stereotypes, getting people to understand how stupid and crazy they really are.
Yeah, I mean, it was exaggerated to the point where the stereotype is ridiculous.
It's over the top.
Yeah.
Right.
It's over the top. And I think when you expose racism over the top, it's a good way to do it.
Right.
Because then people truly see how stupid racism is to begin with.
I mean, do you think it would be great if we had like a political wrestling league?
updated political stereotype for wrestlers?
You got one right now. Watch TV.
Right?
Yeah, I guess we do. We have one.
Through all this stuff, I wouldn't be surprised to find out Vince McMahon's orchestrating it all.
Oh, God. I think you might be right. I think you cracked the code.
Well, look, exhibit number 1 is that everybody's ratings are so high, right?
Yeah.
I mean...
hey, on television, that means money.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, he's been great for TV.
And it's a shame that it's that way. On a serious note, it's so sad that our mainstream media today, especially the news end, has sold out to money. In the old days, it wasn't about money. They made up for money in the entertainment division.
Right.
It was about informing us. Now it's no longer about that. Now it's about deceitful stories. They don't take my court case. Believe it or not, my court cases opened the door for all this when they overturned it. Because we had a law called unjust enrichment. They threw it out now, that law, and that makes it so the media now doesn't have to fact check. They can defame anybody, and they get to keep all the money they make. It would be the equivalent if you robbed the bank and they caught you and you did 2 years in prison, but then when you get out, you get to keep all the money.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what my court case overturning it is now allowing the media to do. I bet you didn't know 32 major media conglomerates entered my court case in the appeal and got it overturned.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Oh, yeah. You need to check up on it. It's a travesty.
And so do you think that's part of what's going on right now? Is that
sure? They don't have to background check no more. They just pump the stories out. They don't do any due diligence. Look at the CNN thing when they found out it was wrong. Okay, those people resigned or got fired. But the whole thing's based on money. The faster you can get it out there, the more money you make. We don't even worry now whether the story's true or not. We'll correct that in a day or two. And it'll mean more money because then we can make that into a story.
There's such an interesting statistic, which is that public confidence in the news media is at its absolute lowest point ever, but viewership is at its highest point ever. Because
it's all entertainment.
Right, exactly. So we're moving into the entertainment space.
Matt, I'll finish like this.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think Trump won? He came right out of his TV show and kept it going.
That's right.
Yep.
It was a TV show, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all he did was bring all the fans, all the publicity. He's more like me. That's the other thing that paralleled. I didn't have to buy publicity, neither did Donald.
Right, right. That was a key insight of his campaign.
If you don't have to buy it, you can run a cheap campaign.
Yep.
By the way, I'll leave you with this thought.
Mm-hmm.
2020, what would you think if the Green Party put forth Robert Kennedy Jr. and Jesse Ventura?
I'd vote for you.
No, do you think that could cause trouble?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Are you thinking of that?
Well, I talked to Robert a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't actually float it by him, but after I was done with the conversation, I thought, boy, we could really throw a wrench in the game in 2020.
Yeah. Why
because
not?
how would they deny us not putting us in the debates?
Well, right.
Yeah, it'd be pretty hard to dismiss completely you two.
Yeah, how would they say, well, you can't get in?
That's right. I mean, between a Kennedy and a former governor, after they elected Donald Trump, there's no way they could keep you out of the
Like
debates.
how they have no justification for.
Well, it's just something to think about, but who knows? I could be off the grid by then.
Wow. So
Matt, great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you, Governor. Thanks so much for coming on.
And thank you for having me on your first show. Let's do it again.
All right. So speaking of wrestling,
all we've been speaking of.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of wrestling, we got to talk about this new act. Who I think he's just like the funniest thing. This new wrestler who calls himself the progressive liberal. This guy, Daniel Richards, who's and where is he? Right, he's like in Kentucky.
Yeah, he's
right?
somewhere in Kentucky.
Right.
Like the really like the one of the really minor local wrestling circuits. Like
right.
He's not on the WrestleMania. This is a very local like Kentucky guy.
Right. Yeah. Like all the clips look like it's on one half of a local like high school gym or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. It's like a local wrestling league, and his shtick is that he's a progressive liberal, and he gets up in front of the conservative audiences and he hectors them about their wrong thinking, and it's hilarious.
I'm going to take care of all these people in Appalachian, Kentucky. Okay? That's how you pronounce it, Nathan Little. You people need to be reprogrammed. You continually vote against your own interests. You put people in Congress, in the White House, that aren't going to help you. They're not going to bring your jobs back. So let me tell you what the progressive liberal Daniel Richards is going to do. We're going to reprogram you. We're going to re-educate you. We're going to teach you to read and write. We're going to help you get jobs with clean energy.
This is a wrestling promo. Like that's the best part. This is a wrestling promo it's the Appalachian Mountain Wrestling.
It's so great. And then he gets up in the ring. Like that was his sort of pregame speech where he's like into the camera, but in the ring he actually does the same thing, and he gets up and he's in like a blue Speedo or he has one with a star. He just shouts at people, "You continually vote against your own interests." It's awesome. It's so funny, right?
Yeah, it's the perfect heel character.
Yeah.
It's designed just to make the audience just despise him.
Right, exactly.
And he's just like shouting normal liberal bromide.
And the funny thing is, it lampoons both his audience and progressive liberals perfectly.
That's why it works. It really does. It's like no one comes out of it. Like it really just highlights the ridiculousness of everyone.
It's a perfect balance. He's like Blade Runner, right? He's like right along the edge of it's perfect. And so it got us to thinking, if we should maybe start our own league, right?
Yeah.
If there were a league of just political wrestlers, political themed wrestlers, like what other characters would we need to have?
Yeah. How would you fill out the all politics wrestling league?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. The progressive liberal is a pretty good start. So do you have any ideas? I mean,
I was going to do one. I think there should be a guy, the moderate Republican. The moderate Republican.
What does he look like?
Well, he wears a blue suit, I think, in the ring while wrestling. He wears a blue suit, and he's also a little too old to be a wrestler.
Right.
And his shtick is similar to the progressive liberal in that like what he's saying is just things that no one in the audience wants to hear. Like no one, but I just like he would, his hype video, he would be yelling at his opponent, like, "I converted to Catholicism and I'm going to convert you to a body bag." I like the old. I appreciate the ancient wisdom and morality of the Catholic Church.
And the majesty.
The majesty of the rites and the rituals.
That would definitely work.
Yeah.
Yeah, people would really hate that. Yeah. I think we got to have the pundit.
Yeah.
So my idea for the pundit, first of all, he has to have a really big head, right?
Yeah.
I think it's got to be like twice the size of a normal human head. And I think what he has to do is just go into the ring and just continually make wrong predictions and not get fired. Right?
Yeah. Like, I'm going to pin you in 10 seconds and then...
Right, exactly. Instead, he gets pinned. Or, like, everything he says turns out exactly the opposite. Like, I can guarantee you the lights will never go out in this arena.
And then they all will go out.
They all go out at that exact moment. Except for just now, he'll say. So we have to have the pundit. The pundit would be a great character. And of course, the great thing about the pundit is that you can never get rid of him from the lineup, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it doesn't matter. Like, people will be sick of him.
Right.
Like the crowds will be unhappy with him, and he'll just be there.
His numbers will be terrible.
Yeah.
And the crowd. Yeah, exactly. But he has to stay.
Yeah.
Who else you got?
I got the technocrat.
Oh yes. Yes.
The technocrat. His deal.
I don't have any ideology.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Like, I believe in results-based wrestling. Like, pure. No particular style. Like, no style of wrestling, just whatever works.
Right.
But he would also, like, his hype video, he would be like, I propose a targeted tax credit to, like, encourage people to kick your ass. Like, we'll nudge them into kicking your ass.
Right. It would be
with
like
tax policy.
It wouldn't even be like an inspirational speech. It would be like an incrementalist.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not even designed to really get you hyped up, but just,
gradually you will be defeated in the ring.
Right. Logically, you may not be excited by my speech, but logically you'll accept it. I think we got to have the globalist.
Yeah.
So my idea about the globalist is that he should look like, or actually be, Gary Cohn.
It actually should just be Gary Cohn.
Right, yeah, exactly. So this is their giant elephantine bald man in a $8,000 suit who just goes around saying that Brexit is a bad idea, and his speech in the ring should be about how look, if we end tariffs everywhere, everyone's standard of living will be raised, and when people boo him, he's going to say, what, you hate poor people in China? Like, why don't you want to raise the standard of living in China? I think that'll go over really well.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Who else we got?
The snowflake.
Oh, yeah.
The snowflake will constantly be threatening to report the other wrestlers for harassment.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yep.
Like, just spend all of his time telling other wrestlers they've been blocked.
Right.
Blocked and reported.
Yeah. That was an illegal maneuver.
Yes, yeah.
Right. According to Section 9-C of the World Political Wrestling Federation manual, you are not allowed to use that technique.
He'll keep going to the refs and be like, "You're allowing this on your platform?
Yeah,
How are you allowing this on your platform?"
He should be like the Chris Paul of the Wrestling Federation, just like constantly working the refs and whining to the refs. Like that should be his thing, right?
Yeah.
We got to have the straw man.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
And clearly the costume would be there, just this covered in straw.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like, covered in straw.
And constantly just making, straw man arguments, like, you like free education? Well, I don't want to pay for Donald Trump's kids to go to school.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, that's a great one.
He should, the straw man would just, like, every time another wrestler said he was like going to beat him, the straw man would have to be like, why are you like threatening to hurt my children or something? Why are you
exactly
if you defeat me in the ring, like
right
you also
take it 2 steps too far. Yeah. But I think the straw man could be good because he could have an actual real political career.
He could do really well for himself.
Yeah, and just stand up there, and I can see him in the debates. You'd have like Marco Rubio, and then anyway.
We talked about the Aspen Institute Strangler.
Okay, so to be fair, this was somebody tweeted this at me.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody came up with this idea, but I thought it was a funny idea.
Yeah.
So, but
I like. They could also be the thought leader.
Right. I like the Aspen Institute Strangler.
I kind of like the sound of that too.
Yeah.
And they would constantly be recording all of their hype videos from Aspen.
Right.
And they would also
over lunch with Chris Matthews.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And they'd be talking about like international trends
right.
in the way in which they will like kick your ass in the ring.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yep.
Then the Aspen Institute Strangler would say, here's my Aspen idea. Your ass getting pinned.
That's bad.
I know. I just came up with that.
That took guts for you to actually say that.
Must credit Alex Perrine for that. That's my good joke. Thank you.
No, that was good.
That was Alex Perrine's good joke.
I like that one. I think we need to have the apologist.
Yeah.
Right. So when all the other there's got to be a bully wrestler in there, and when the bully's like kicking somebody's ass and doing something really terrible in the ring, I think the apologist should be sort of in or near the ring saying, look, you're not looking at it from his point of view. He had to hit him with the chair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Consider what the alternatives were
right.
And actually what you saw wasn't what you think you saw. He didn't actually hit him that way. That wasn't illegal.
Yeah, that wasn't he didn't kick him in the groin. And if he did, it wasn't intentional. And if it was intentional, it was justified.
He was acting on the best intelligence that he had at the time. Right. Yeah. And then that would be a great role to have him just sort of there constantly like apologizing for any bad behavior that goes on in the ring.
I feel like the apologist and the pundit are going to have a lot of interactions with each other.
Yeah,
too.
I think it should be like Mork and Mindy. They should get married in the end. Right? Like, that would be a signal that the show isn't going so well.
My other one, my last one was the college Republican, and his gimmick is that he takes every bad thing he thinks the other wrestlers are doing but aren't doing and does it to make a point, but like his point makes no sense, So like he's like I see the other wrestlers are constantly cheating, so I will cheat harder, he will constantly be trying to argue that all the other wrestlers are only there because of affirmative action and only he deserves to be in the ring.
Right, exactly. Exactly. He's the only one who got there on his own merits.
But his dad was a wrestler too. His dad.
Right.
Actually, the college Republican has to be like a child of Vince McMahon.
Right.
And they have to constantly assert that they got there on merit.
Yeah, I'm the only one who wrestled my way into this ring.
Yes,
right?
The only one who deserves to be here.
Everybody else is here as a result of an affirmative action.
Political correctness.
Political correctness, exactly. Okay, the other punchline to this progressive liberal story, which is so hilarious, is that, on the week that this guy did this video and it kind of rocketed around the internet, Deadspin did a story on him and like a whole bunch of people retweeted it, and then there were a lot of stories about this guy. And so there were clips of him saying, you continually vote against your own interests all over social media and on the internet. And what does David Brooks write? Immediately, like his next column is entitled "What's the Matter with Republicans?" and it contains this line: "What's going on? Why do working class conservatives seem to vote so often against their own economic interests?" So it's like art imitating life, imitating art.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
I like to imagine David Brooks wearing the big Hillary Clinton shirt that the progressive liberal has on as he typed that up. Also, I like to imagine a high school auditorium full of like Kansas wrestling fans just throwing things at David Brooks and jeering him.
As he types.
While he's like, you don't understand, it goes back to the 19th century.
Right, there was a study at Harvard. This wasn't my idea. No, that was great. It's all great stuff. So we had a lot of wrestling stuff go on this week, and it was all hilarious. So
next week is tennis. Everything will be tennis.
Yeah, we're gonna have a tennis themed show next week. But that's it for the Progressive Liberal. So
this Progressive Liberal. That's it for this Progressive Liberal too.